As you know, as the situation in Israel gets better and better, so tourism gets better, and last year we broke all records with more than 3.5 million people coming, and it seems to be getting better and better every year. One of the people responsible for this is Tourism Minister Landau, who thankfully has just walked into the room. So I would like to, without further ado, call on Minister Landau to address us.
Mr. Editor, distinguished guests, the topic Israel and the US in the new Middle East. Well, the first edition of the new Middle East is the Oslo Agreement. When we were presented with this agreement, the Israeli public was in a euphoria. We all want to have peace. And we were promised that here is peace coming just around the corner with this agreement. Mr. Perez went that far to suggest that after this agreement, Israel and the PLO will together combat the Hamas extremists. I should add that not everybody believed that this is what's going to happen, but everybody in Israel hoped that the Oslo Agreement will eventually bring to peace or at least to coexistence. The reason for this agreement, as the late Mr. Rabin said, he said that he had an underlying agreement with Mr. Arafat, who committed himself to never again terror. Every difference between Israel and the Palestinian Authority will be straightened out through negotiations. And the new logic that guided Israel leadership was that it is not, as was before, security will bring to peace, our strength will bring to peace, but rather these will be the peace agreements and the withdrawals and the Palestinian promises and the support of the international community that will bring us peace. Well, the result of that New Middle East edition was that in the area in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, we saw the development of a Palestinian terror entity. It provided tremendous boost to terrorism, and we ended up in Israel paying over 1,000 people who were murdered and tens of thousands who were injured because of this blatant wave of terror at the beginning of the previous decade. Now, the state of mind still remained in Israel that brought us to the withdrawal from Lebanon to the last inch of the international border, and then the disengagement, as it is so called, from Gaza, including the transfer of Jewish communities. There is no more occupation either in Gaza nor in Lebanon yet. In Lebanon on the north and Gaza in the south, these places became bases for launching missiles against Israel, and these two places under the sponsorship of Iran. Hamas terrorists came through free election to the helm at the Palestinian Authority. And looking today at what's happening, I'm not sure that all of us have learned the lessons of the first edition of the New Middle East. Today there is a new edition of the New Middle East. It's referred to as the Arab Spring. And here again in Israel, we viewed with hope these new occurrences in the Middle East, hoping that this is going to bring to a more democratic and flourishing Middle East. What has resulted is an Arab Spring, which is basically a huge earthquake of titanic proportions, where we see Arab nation states are challenged by radical Islam. We see a clash between Sunni Islam and Shiite Islam. We do see following Sadat's beautiful description, he once said that Egypt is the only Arab state, all the rest are tribes with flags. And we see in the Middle East there's so many different ethnic communities and the clans and the different tribes, each starting to fight each other. Interestingly, everywhere where you have election, it was a turn of the country to Islam or the Sharia law. As one of the leaders of Muslim Brotherhood in Libya described it, he said that democracy is much like slippers. When we reach the bathtub, we take them off. Well, that's what's happening in the Middle East as nation upon nation have crumbled before our very eyes, one by one. That's in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Tunisia, in Yemen, and this list still goes on. And by crumbling, I mean not just their governmental regime, but also a complete disregard of basic and natural human values. The set of values have gone bankrupt in the Middle East. Now, radical Muslims are strengthening themselves with terrorists who are constantly pouring from all over the world. And we speak now in the Middle East about terrorists who are coming from very different organizations such as Al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra and Bayt al-Maqdis and Islamic Jihad and Salafis and Muslim Brotherhood and Hezbollah and ISIL, that is those Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, tens of thousands. You will see today in Syria, in Iraq, in the Sinai Peninsula, in Egypt, in Lebanon, and amongst them, please note, we do have many thousands of Muslims who came from Europe and the United States, and they are second and third generation of immigrants over there who come to join terrorism in the Middle East. They go there through training with weapons and explosives, and many of them go back to their countries in Europe and the United States, where in the future they will join the revolution of radical Islam in these states. Now, it's interesting to note that there is also a different and new kind of geopolitical deployment. We do see an Shiite axis, which is between Iran, Syria, and Lebanon, supported by Russia, and is getting stronger. We have this axis of Muslim Brotherhood by Qatar and Turkey. We have this Sunni axis, where we see those countries of Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan and the Gulf Emirates and Kuwait who are behind it. And by the way, interestingly, you have over there some joint interest between them and Israel. Now, the tragedy is that there are no constraints on the use of force in the Middle East. Everything over there is allowed. And there is no real way to stabilize the situation. And that's why I see the chaos expected to continue until there will eventually be some huge force from the outside who will come to this vacuum in order to fill it up. The purpose of radical Islam, Sunni and Shiite alike, is to defeat and bring to the collapse of the Arab world and then turn to Europe and the United States, not for coexistence, but rather to defeat them. And their grand strategy is a world without Europe, without the United States, of course without Israel. Their grand objective is replacing our Judeo-Christian value with those of the Sharia law. Now, as we see the characteristics of this Middle East, it's more religious, it's more extreme, less stable, with huge economic problems, less friendly to the West in general and anti-American in particular. This is the Arab New Middle East, like its geography. It's of moving sands. There is no mercy for the weak, no value to signed agreements. As Mr. Perez once said, the number of agreements violated in the Middle East is equal to the number of agreements signed in the Middle East. And in this Middle East, the only reliable, stable, strong ally of the democratic West is Israel. And interestingly, Israel's stability and strength is critically important to the security and stability of countries which are still friendly to the West, like Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the like. Let me just note, a side note, that if we were to have neighbors like Switzerland, like Holland, or like your neighbors, Canadians, we would have had a long ago peace in the Middle East. But these aren't our neighbors. I should just add, of course, that over that Middle East we have Iran, nuclear capability development, which is casting its shadow. I'll just note that the purpose of the West must be to stop Iran having the option of developing a nuclear capability at its will. I should add that the sanctions that were relieved is a major mistake, and that all of the agreements signed until now between the West and Iran is a source of grave concern. And as we see, this combination of mad ideology, of terror organizations with thousands of people and tens of thousands of people, and terrorists who are coming to Europe, and with the Iranian casting their shadow, all these are components of a gathering storm which is threatening our very Western world. Now, the Palestinians in this new Middle East, we have been told always that the root cause of all of the wars in the Middle East is the Palestinian issue, is the making it insolvable to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. Now, this reality simply proves that this idea is a myth. All of the revolutions of what is shaking the Middle East has nothing to do with the Palestinians. They aren't mentioned even once. Nobody cares about them. They're not a factor. Would Iran, for example, stop its nuclear endeavor if there will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians? The Palestinians are concerned or are taken into consideration by Iran only to promote Iranian goals, but nothing that has to do with the Palestinians. And also, if an Arab country wants to have peace, such was the case with Egypt and with Jordan, they signed this peace with or without the Palestinians. Now, how do our friends in Europe and in America understand this Arab Spring? Still, some do believe that the Arab Spring still marks a transitioning of many of the Arab countries toward democracy. People still fail to see the reality that this is not really an Arab Spring. It's an Arab tsunami, which is ruthless, violent, treacherous. And we should ask ourselves, why still too many in the West are demanding Israel to make concessions under the logic that if there will be a peace with the Palestinians, this will be a precondition to peace and stability in the Middle East? And they demand us go and discuss the core issues. Speak about the Palestinian state, about the borders of '67, freeze your settlements, divide Jerusalem. Well, go to tough concessions. It is called brave decisions. Well, these are also the characteristics of the present political initiative which is taking place in the Middle East. And I would like to make a few comments. First of all, in Israel, everybody wants to have peace, left and right. And we do understand that peace involves compromise. We have fought wars. Now we have our kids in the army. Everybody in Israel wants to have peace, and the debate is with respect to the road to peace. This is the only debate that we have. And let's have a couple of comments about the Palestinian Authority and about a Palestinian state. In parallel to the present political initiative, the Palestinians are running a worldwide campaign for the delegitimization of Israel. They vilify us everywhere. Just examples to what they say, starting with Arafat and then Abu Mazen and Nabil Shad and Saeb Erekat. They say there is no Jewish people. Jews have no right to the land of Israel. They have no affinity, historical affinity to the Holy Land. They have no history in Jerusalem. Jerusalem has never been their capital. In fact, Abu Mazen speaks about the imaginary temple. They refer to Judea and Samaria as the West Bank. They describe us as an apartheid state, and this goes all over the world. Just last Christmas, Arafat in Bethlehem spoke about Jesus, who was a Palestinian. Let's just say a few comments on that. First of all, let's remind ourselves and our friends that Jesus was a Jew, first of all. Secondly, when they speak about Judea and Samaria being the West Bank, we know when we read the Bible that King David was born in Bethlehem, Judea, not in Bethlehem, the West Bank. They say that the Temple Mount does not belong to the Jews, and that the Western Wall belongs to the Palestinians. Well, let's tell everybody that for 2,000 years, this place was called the Temple Mount. Even when our temple was destroyed over there, it wasn't called the Palestinian Mount. It wasn't called the Mosque Mount, because every civilized man knew that everybody who reads the Bible knows that the Temple Mount was called, because this was the temple of the Jews that was built by King Solomon on a mountain bought by King David. Every civilized man knows that Jerusalem, since the time of King David, was a capital of the Jews only for 2,000 years. It hasn't been claimed by any other people. When the late Prime Minister Begin came to the United States, he said Jerusalem, D.C., David's capital. Now the Muslims themselves, they ruled this area for 1,300 years, until 100 years ago. No other people established there its sovereignty. There was no Palestinian state there. And even between 1947 and 1967, when they had Judea and Samaria, and they had Jerusalem, no Palestinian state came into being, and Jerusalem wasn't declared their capital. And we should also agree with them that there is apartheid in the Middle East, apartheid against women, against minorities, against Christians, against Jews, against the right of the State of Israel to exist. There is apartheid in the Arab state. There is apartheid in the Palestinian Authority. Now, with respect to the political negotiations which are now taking place, one of the ideas over there is a Palestinian state. And we should ask, is this a real solution? After all, you base your policy on reality, not on dreams. And the superpowers that delineated the borders right after the First World War, and they provided 99% of the territory to Arab countries and only 1% to the Jewish country. They perhaps didn't know what Sadat said about the only Arab country being Egypt and all the rest are tribes with flags. As we see in front of our very eyes all of the Arab countries surrounding us, collapsing. Will a Palestinian state that was never into being, will this phenomenon hold? The Palestinian Authority has already disintegrated once. Before the Arab Spring, we have signed the road agreement with one authority, and then it was split to Gaza, the de facto Palestinian state run by Hamas extremists, and to Judea and Samaria, run by the Palestinian Authority. See what we have in Judea and Samaria. We have those clans in the city of Shechem who feel superior to those in the city of Hebron, and both of these hate the guts of the tribes of Gaza. And in Gaza we have the Hamas. They already said that they are not going to recognize any agreement. 40% of the population is from Gaza. So what kind of an agreement do we have with the horizon, with the Palestinian state over there? And what's more, who is the partner? Who is the partner who wants to have peace and can deliver? Well, we are told it is Abu Mazen. What's his mandate? He was elected until the year of 2010. And as of then, he extends his presidentship every year. Let me make you sure that if he knew that he is going to win election, he long ago would go for election. And he's not Sadat. He doesn't want to have peace. He was responsible to the Palestinian educational system that teaches their kids the Jews are descendants of apes and monkeys. That's Abu Mazen. And if there will be a Palestinian state, God forbid I add, what will it look the day after? In every day, in every country over there, we do see the extremists, the Islamists getting stronger, reinforced by Al-Qaeda and Salafist people. Only in Judea and Samaria they will be absent. One revolution they have already made in Gaza. Iran will not extend its hand with weapons, with agents as it does in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon. Russia will not provide its sponsorship as it does in Syria. And the port of Gaza that will be opened, do we really believe that it will be open for the Sixth Fleet, or perhaps for the Russian fleet, or for Iranian ships? But above it all, there are millions of refugees who live today in the Middle East, spread all over. How many of them will come to Judea and Samaria and then pushed and spill over to Israel? People speak about the lines of 67. These are lines which make Israel 10 miles wide. It'll provide a total control from the Judea and Samaria mountains over the coastal plains with very simple short-range Katyusha rockets that will be there in their tens and tens of thousands. They will be able to cripple the entire state, to totally destroy our transportation network, our communication links, our hospitals, the international Ben Gurion airport. It will be a nightmare. It will be impossible to defend such a state. It's as if you put Israel on the edge of a cliff and the only thing needed is to give it a push-off. What country in the world do we know that has its state residence of its president within a mile from the enemy line? This is why our legendary foreign minister once termed these lines as Auschwitz lines. That's not a prescription for peace, just for terror. And that's why, let me just make the two following comments. First of all, we don't want to run the life of the Palestinians. And I pray for the day that the Palestinians will be able to run themselves effectively, that they will not develop into a failed entity. We need to see a partner over there who wants to have peace and can deliver. Like Sadat, we want to see effective security forces. We want to see independent legal system, free press. We wish to see a different educational system that will teach the future generation with peace. Now, as we are now looking on Israel, the US, and the new Middle East, I think there is now many in Israel who think differently than was the case in the past. Given these new realities, and taking into consideration the lessons of the first new Middle East, a growing number of political forces in Israel do not believe in a viable Palestinian state. And they don't believe in a close peace agreement. Not that we don't want to have, we do want to have, but we don't believe. People won't accept the 67 lines, and not the division of Jerusalem. And the changes we have to make in our foreign policy, first, the purpose of negotiations with the Palestinians should not be peace now. That's not real. What is real, the maximum, is interim, long-range agreements that eventually will lead to peace. And the necessary condition for that is economic development and security cooperation that will increase the standard of living and that will create a routine of life that eventually bring to peace. The Palestinian state. There is a reality over there of 1.7 million Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, and for that we have to find a solution. And it's not clear what will be the long-range solution, but what is clear, that the Palestinian state is not a solution. The Palestinian state is going to create a problem worse than the problem it is going to solve. And he wants to have peace and stability, does not want to have a Palestinian state. We can't have Palestine run by Iran. And with the absence of a solution, this is a conflict that has to be managed. Now, well, I'll just run to the end. One thing I wish to say, that we are offered guarantees, and we are offered economic assistance and technological know-how if we only go to far-reaching concessions. Let me say that we should never make those concessions which are going to in any way undermine our strength. We are told that the alternative is boycott and isolation. Alliances and guarantees are an important component in national security. But we should accept it only on a condition that Israel could guarantee the safety of its citizens without alliances and without guarantees. Israel can rely on itself only. And my last comment is, I'm also a Minister of Tourism, and the last year was a year of record high. Please come and help me on the statistics of 2014. Please come and see the country for your very eyes, not through the eyes of our friends in the CNN and our friends in the BBC and our friends in the New York Times. See the true Israel, that we are an island of democracy, of rule of law, of freedom, of free press, of open economy, surrounded by the rough seas of dictatorships of terror, of corruption, of oppression of women. We are a colossal achievement of the Zionist endeavor of historical justice. It's a privilege to support Israel. And for all those who want to stand for Israel and with Israel, the best place is to stand in Israel. Good luck.